We are now just about 2 weeks away from the 2025 NHL Draft. Today, we're going to do our weekly recap of all the latest rumors and speculation of what may happen at the draft. Is there any chance the first overall pick could be traded? Could the team picking first, the New York Islanders, walk away with two of the top prospects in this draft? Which teams are looking to move up? Which teams are maybe looking to move their first round pick for immediate help? Which other NHL rostered experienced players could be traded during this event as well? We'll discuss all the latest rumors and all we know about this draft coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here today. It's going to be our weekly roundup of all the NHL rumors leading into the 2025 NHL Draft. I think this is going to have the possibility of being a very active time for lots of transactions in the NHL, not just draft picks being traded, not just jockeying for position to get certain prospects on your team, but with NHL, existing experienced contracted players being moved as part of this as well. It's quite often a very busy time. The last probably, the day or two leading into the draft, the day of the first round, and even the second day when they do rounds 2 through 7, there's typically a fair bit of NHL activity. And then, of course, some of that carries over into July 1st into free agency. We get a lot of signings, but there's also still some more trades usually left to be made here as well. So let's get started first with all the latest intel around what we might see at one of the biggest events on the NHL calendar throughout the year. Now, first up, at the top of the draft, you've got the New York Islanders, who were very fortunate, of course, to win the draft lottery and move up to pick first overall. Of course, the team is going through a transition, hiring a new general manager with Matthew Darche. I mean, really, what new first-time general manager wouldn't love to walk into a predicament where your team is now selecting first overall? It's a big help to get this team turned around. Obviously, there's been lots of chatter around that pick. Is there any chance it could be moved? There was some, I guess you could say, rumors that between the Islanders, the Sharks, and the Blackhawks in the top 3 spots, that maybe there was a little bit of talk about jockeying for position, that they might all have a different player that they really want to make sure they get, and maybe, trading within those spots might help make everybody be more comfortable that they kind of get the player that they covet going into this draft. Obviously, I think for the Islanders to move off of number 1 would take a lot. It would take a massive overpayment. Obviously, they get, first pick out of everybody. They know that they're going to get the player that they want because nobody's picking in front of them. Obviously, even at number 2 with the San Jose Sharks, they have to understand that the Islanders are most likely taking Matthew Schaefer, and that there's a pretty good chance that they're going to zero in on. Obviously, I suspect they're going to have Schaefer number 1 as well, and then they're going to have a more realistic number 1 on the number 2 of their draft board. But the rumors around the Sharks were that they really wanted to get Schaefer, and if the Islanders coveted a different player like hometown player James Haggins or something like that, or Michael Misa, that maybe they would be able to do a swap. And obviously the Sharks would have to trade picks and add a bunch of other stuff to it to make the Islanders even want to consider that. But right now, we don't have any reason to believe that's necessarily the case. And when looking at Chicago at number 3, it sounds like they're more likely to pick a player that's not going to have any chance of going 1 or 2 anyway. So all those rumors we talked about before, they could still happen. But I think, to me, the only way it happens is if the San Jose Sharks really decide that they absolutely have to have Schaefer and they're willing to pay a ridiculous boatload price that Matthew Darche just can't say no to. The odds of that happening are pretty slim. But that's the speculation around those picks. I think the most likely scenario is that Schaefer goes to the Islanders at 1, Misa goes to the Sharks at number 2, and then number 3 is a little bit of a wild card. All the speculation around the Blackhawks that they like a few players, but the players that they seem to like don't seem to be named James Haggins. Now, I'm not saying they don't like him completely, but they like these other players more. And I think there's a pretty good chance a player like Haggins, even though at one point was in the conversation for first overall, could slip. Now, if the Islanders really want to take their hometown player at 1, Maybe that happens and everybody else slides. It would really throw everything for a loop. But all the intel doesn't seem to indicate that right now. I mean, as much as they'd like to have the good story of having their hometown player, they have to do what they feel is best for the franchise, and passing up on Schaefer just might be a mistake they're not willing to make at the end of the day. The Blackhawks, though, seem to be fond of a few other players, including Moncton Wildcats centerman Caleb Desnoyers. They feel like he would be a great complement to their center core. Seems like they are also quite fond of Anton Frondel. There's some people that think that Frondel might have a chance to be comparable to Alexander Barkov. Now, that's a big shoes to fill. Finnish captain, Stanley Cup champion, Selke Trophy winner. I don't know anybody saying he's going to be Barkov, but there are people that think that he kind of has some similar attributes and has the potential to have a similar impact on their team that Barkov has had on the Panthers. So, again, if he has potential to be a number one or number two center that's going to be able to produce a decent amount of offense, shut down the other team's top players, and be in the Selke conversation when he's at his peak of his career, that's a player that's pretty hard to pass up on as well. I've also heard a little bit about Porter Martone. Of course, big size, goal-scoring ability. Might be a great player to put on the flank with Bedard or even Nazar. So, those seem to be the guys in the conversation here for number 3 with the Chicago Blackhawks. So that leads us down to the number 4 spot, which is a major wild card, because we've heard a variety of rumors about the Utah Mammoth and what they may or may not do with that number 4 pick. There are some people that think that the Mammoth are open to trading it, and that if they do trade it, they want basically a first-line player who can jump right into their roster and have immediate help. So, of course, if you look around the league and you look around some names that are potentially available for trade, there's not a lot of players that screams fit that decision or that description. So I don't know that it's a likely scenario. Now, there's also some that think that some of the players that they like at 4 might be available at a different spot, and that if they can move down, probably not a lot, but if they wanted to move down with any of the teams picking like 4, 5, 6, 7, so you're looking at Nashville, Philly, Boston, and they wanted to swap with them and get an extra asset or something, that maybe they're willing to do that. There was some talk that Utah really liked Brady Martin. Martin seems like he's 100% going to be a top 10 pick, and at this rate, it wouldn't even be shocking if he was a top 5 or 6 pick. So, because of some of these players like Desnoyers, Frondel, and Martin, there's some teams in that top end of top, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spots really like those guys. So there's a possibility guys like Haggins or Martone or even Roger McQueen, like some of these prospects might slip lower than some people might think. And it just depends. But Utah will be a major wild card at the number 4 spot. It's really kind of hard to say. Now, there's been some speculation wondering, could the New York Islanders pull something off to walk out of the draft with Schaefer and Haggins? What a masterclass that would be if it could be done from new GM Matthew Darche. Now, not going to be easy, but if there's any chance of it happening, essentially how it could play out would be that they would take Schaefer with the first overall selection. You'd have Michael Misa go to, assuming Michael Misa goes to the Sharks at 2. Number 3 at Chicago, they take one of the players that they've been linked to, whether it be Frondel, Desnoyers. I don't think they would take a guy like Martin at 3. He's probably going to go a little lower, maybe Martone. So like one of those guys go to 3 to Chicago, and then that leaves Haggins on the board at number 4, and then the Islanders would have to figure out a trade with Utah to make them want to give them the selection. Now, what could they include? Now, Matthew Darche has already been on record saying that he's confirmed with some of their core players like Matthew Barzal and Bo Horvat that he has no plans to trade them, that he sees them as being parts of the core for years to come. Now, when that was mentioned, he didn't mention Noah Dobson. Now, Dobson, of course, is coming up on a contract. Lots of speculation about him if they're getting Schaefer. Now, to me, ideally, I think as an Islanders team, you probably want Schaefer and Dobson. But if you can leave that draft with Schaefer and Hagens, would you consider that? I just don't know what else the Islanders would really have to entice Utah to make it happen. If you look at the Islanders roster, they need more of this youth, not less. And there's not a lot in the cupboards, but what they do have, they want to keep. There's no way they're going to move Cal Ritchie or Cole Yzerman. But if you have some, I say younger veterans, guys that are still lots of prime years left, like Barzal and like Horvat, and then you can have this next wave coming in. If they could get their hands on Hagens, and then you got Ritchie and you've got Yzerman coming, okay, there'd be a lot more optimism around this team moving forward. So I don't know. I mean, there's some people think that the Islanders are going to try to pull that off and leave the draft with two of those top prospects. Besides Dobson, I'm not really sure what else they could offer to Utah to make them really go, should we do this? I don't know. But that's would be quite the thing if they could pull it off. It would be the biggest story of the draft. I have no doubt. But like I said, Chicago doesn't seem to be big on Hagens. We don't really know where Utah stands. There was a lot of talk that Utah, if they make the pick, that they are also a big fan of Brady Martin. Now, of course, you got to remember, at 4, between Desnoyers and Frondel, one of those guys are also going to be on the board. At least one of them, right? So maybe both. It really boils down to who goes at 3. Let's say that the top 3 goes Schaefer, Misa, and Martone. Well, then you've got the pick of Desnoyers, Frondel, Martin. I'm not sure that Utah goes Martin at that point. So there's going to be some good players there. There's no doubt. So Utah will have their options. It just doesn't seem to be that those 3-4 spots. I think Hagens could slip. That's what it sounds like right now. But there's more intel I'm sure will pop up, which might make things look a little bit different. But to me, the Utah number 4 pick, it's a big wild card. It's a big wild card. And Bill Armstrong, of course, has history of going off the board. They don't usually take who you think they're going to take. During his time when they were the Coyotes, or even last year, they just don't seem to. And then last year was a little different. They took Tisha Ginla. That one was a little bit more predictable. But otherwise, yeah, they're not. They're a team that goes off the board a lot and might take a player that you might have them picking at 4. They might take a player a lot of teams have ranked at 10. Well, we'll see. The Boston Bruins we have some new intel on them. Right now they're at the number 7 spot, and there's some speculation that they're trying to move up in the draft and they'd like to get into the top 5. So, like I said, to get a top 3 pick, I think it's going to cost a boatload. The thing with the Bruins is they don't have a lot of young assets they can really part with either. I mean, they do have some, but again, they're a team that doesn't have a deep prospect pool. They've been very competitive for a long stretch of time. This is the first time missing the playoffs in a while. There's not a lot in the cupboards working their way up. So, you've got Poitras, you've got Minton. There's not a ton there. So they really, I don't think, can afford to trade the pick. But there was some talk that if they can't move up, but there's a trade that they might be willing to trade the pick out for a player that can help them right away. Again, maybe that happens. I think they should keep it myself because they don't have a deep prospect pool. And I think they'd be fooling themselves to think that they can go back to being a historically high-ranking, high regular season team like they were a couple of years ago that quickly. But we'll see. But trying to move up in the top 5 if they can, again, that's going to be hard to do. Maybe they can go into the Utah pick. Or maybe at 5, but I just don't know what they're going to offer. It'd have to be a lot of picks that I'm not sure they can really afford to do. There's also a lot of talk that the Pittsburgh Penguins are looking to move up as well. Of course, they're still got a ways to go with where they were ranked in the draft here. With where they're sitting, they're probably going to be able to get a decent player, but maybe not a player that's going to be as impactful or as immediately impactful as some of the teams picking. Not 4, 5, 6, 7 range. So keep your eye on the Pittsburgh Penguins. They certainly have lots of interest to move up here as well. The Montreal Canadiens, again, another team to watch, picking at 16 and 17 right now. There was a lot of chatter that they are looking to move up as well, and that they would be willing to move either one or both of those picks, depending on what it takes, maybe even add a prospect or roster player or other assets to it if they could get immediate help. They're looking for a number 2 center or a top 4 right-hand defenseman. So those picks could be used with, like I said, in conjunction of other assets to make that happen. They have a pretty deep prospect pool. They've got a lot of youth on the roster already that they're pretty confident in moving forward. They don't really need those picks. They could be better served by getting more established players that can help them move forward more quickly. So we'll see. I mean, there was also some talk that they may want to use some of those if they think there's a player they can get, like that Utah pick at 4. If they're willing to move it, and some people think they are, if Montreal could give them 16, 17, say maybe like a Logan Mailloux and another prospect or another future pick or later pick or whatever, maybe they do that. Does Utah say, okay, we can move back, we'll get 2 middle first rounders, we're going to get a prospect we really like that can jump to the NHL right away, and a future pick? Maybe they do that. And maybe there's a player there that Montreal really likes. The rumor around Montreal, because it's been a long time since they've had a star French-Canadian player, that they were really fond of Caleb Desnoyers. Now, I think a lot of teams are fond of Caleb regardless of where he's from and regardless of his first language. So, in all honesty, he's a heck of a player. I've seen him play a lot locally here at the Moncton Wildcats. And I think any team will be happy to have him. But I can see, we know in Montreal, it's really the only team in the league where there's certain attributes that are more important to them. And it really resonates with the fan base to have somebody that speaks the language that's from there. For the longest time, Quebec produced a lot of high-end NHL players, a lot of which had a lot of deep history with that organization. And obviously in the last 20, 25, 30 years, there's just not as many as they used to be. And it's been a little while since they've really had a star French-Canadian player from Quebec. So, they have a chance to get one. They might be willing to give up a lot to make it happen. So we'll have to monitor that situation. But Montreal, in the last 2, 3, 4 years, as long as Ken Hughes has been there, has been a team to watch anyways. They're definitely, not opposed to making a big splash and trying to make that team better to accelerate their rebuilds. Now, other teams to watch, this could involve either moving up, down, or getting players into their organizations immediately. So keep in mind the Blue Jackets, multiple first-round picks at 14 and 20. Don Waddell's made it publicly known he's open to trading both. Again, the right deal has to come along. Maybe they offer both, like I said with Montreal. Maybe they go to one of the teams in the top 10. If there's a player they really like, and they say, okay, we'll give you 14 and 20 plus a prospect for the number 6, the number 7, the number 8, or whatever, and they move up. That's a possibility. You get the Calgary Flames picking. They don't have their own pick, but they have 2 other picks they acquired via trade, which is pick number 18 and either 31 or 32. Of course, we don't know who's going to win the cup yet. So, of course, the Oilers and Panthers are right now, they're slotted as 31 for Florida, 32 for Edmonton, just based on regular season standings. So the Flames, of course, have the Panther pick they got from the Tkachuk trade. And then there's the Nashville Predators, who have 3 first-round picks. They're picking at 5, 23, and 26. Again, consider they need to get young in a hurry. I'd be quite shocked if they trade at 5, but at 23, 26, would not be surprised if they maybe did something to either move up or if they could get a young player that can come help them right away. But at the same time, some of these teams with not so deep prospect pools, it wouldn't be a complete shocker if they kept all the picks, but it really boils down to how they feel about the prospects there. The Flyers are picking at 6, 22, and 32. Again, just like Nashville, probably not moving off 6, but definitely a team to watch who could be moving up or down or acquiring younger talent that could be impactful to their organization very, very quickly. Some players to watch. Now, of course, like I said, there's usually lots of trades around the draft, so those are the teams to watch. Now, sometimes you get trades at the draft that the bigger part of the trade is actually like the roster players, the existing experienced guys, and maybe there's a second or third rounder that's a part of it. Small part, but it's still announced at the draft. Sometimes it's not even, or it's around first round picks, and sometimes it's just not. It's just a time when teams are getting ready. You got to remember, the draft is right before free agency, so there's lots to do to prepare for the following season. So some players to keep an eye on. One is young Isaac Howard in Tampa, the former first rounder. According to someone, Frank Saravalli posted yesterday saying he believes the relationship between Howard and the Lightning is pretty much over, and then it's a virtual guarantee that he's going to get traded. So wouldn't be shocking if a team, especially one of those later first round picks, that maybe they're offered up for Howard and Tampa gets an extra first rounder. Whether it be Nashville at 26 or Philly at 31 or 32, if the Flames at 31, one of those teams. I would suspect whoever trades for him are going to ask for permission to speak to his agent, make sure he'll sign with them. But Isaac Howard, I think, is almost a certainty to be traded in some sort of relation to the draft and a higher pick or something being used. JJ Peterka is a name to watch. Buffalo seems to be a little more reluctant to move him. And I think if they don't, they need to be awfully worried about an offer sheet. I think Peterka is one of the top names to watch in that regard. So we'll see. Calgary defenseman Rasmus Andersson is going to be getting a lot of attention. Again, they may hang on to him, and he may be a deadline trade. But looking at how the Calgary Flames did this past season, you got to ask yourself, if you're Calgary, saying, okay, if we have a decent season and we can be a playoff team, we're not going to want to subtract. Even if we're in the mix and we're like, maybe there's getting towards the deadline, maybe you're 2 or 3 points out. You know that it's within the reach. You think you can get there. Are you going to want to subtract from your team? No. The answer is no, right? You want to get into the playoffs if you can. Obviously, it's great for business, generates revenue, and gets your younger players a lot of valuable experience. So you're not going to want to do that. So ultimately, Calgary, I think he's more likely that we see an Andersson trade in the summer because, like I said, if they get there, why you're not going to want to subtract, and then you're at risk to lose him for nothing in the offseason. So to me, he could be a major deadline piece, but I think the team is good enough to compete for a playoff spot. I don't know if they're going to get it, but they'll be close, and that could be problematic for them. So I think it's more likely to happen now. It sure seems like there's a good chance we're going to see Marco Rossi be moved, although apparently Minnesota might be having a little bit of a second thought, just because it sounds like they may be having a hard time finding another center that they can target as a return piece or as a separate trade to replace him. So lots of smoke around Marco Rossi, but again, that's going to be an interesting player to watch. Some other younger players include K'Andre Miller. He's expected to move, could involve draft picks. Bo Byram at Buffalo, that likely is going to involve a first rounder, I would suspect. Marty Necas may not move out of Colorado, but there's some that wonder if the Avalanche are worried about him not wanting to re-sign. So again, they don't have to deal with that right now, but I'm sure teams are going to inquire, and if they inquire, it depends on what comes up in conversation. But speaking of the Avalanche, Sam Girard's a name to watch as a potential cost-cutting move for them. Erik Karlsson, too. Again, teams are looking to improve to win a cup now. The Penguins are very open to moving Karlsson. Some goaltenders to watch include Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in Buffalo. I think the Sabres are open to moving just about anybody, not just Peterka, not just Luukkonen. I'd throw Jack Quinn in the mix. I'd throw Alex Tuch in the mix. I would throw, like I said, not just Byram. Some teams are poking around Owen Power. I don't think they really want to do that, but teams are asking. There's Matthias Samuelsson. I think they'd be open to that for the right move. And there's other guys too. The Sabres are pretty wide open for the most part. But yeah, UPL is definitely one of them. John Gibson could finally find himself a new home. Demko is a possibility. It sounds less likely that the Canucks want to move Elias Pettersson. So, the first video I made about this probably 2-3 weeks ago, I thought it was greater chance that Pettersson could get moved at the draft. Now I think it's pretty unlikely. You never know. Things can always change on a dime, but it sounds to me like it's a pretty good chance that he's likely going to stay in Vancouver. I think they're really worried about making a mistake and seeing him excel somewhere else, which I can certainly understand. As you have to be careful with. So that is all your latest intel around the 2025 NHL draft. Of course, like I said, we'll be kind of recapping this probably about once a week from now over the next couple of weeks. So it's usually going to be typically a Saturday type of video. So certainly stay tuned for that. Lots of other news, mock drafts, and other stuff around the 2025 NHL draft, as well as all the other news and rumors around the entire NHL. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.